All right. You ready? On the basis we've set up now, thinking about it for yourself, will everybody who believes that they have at some point sinned, please hold up a hand? God help us. Thank you kindly. Let me sort. I really did have 3 endings here.
I have a quick question. Do we get to know the 2 other endings?
If you want, I'll publish them. Yeah.
On the internet?
Well, somewhere. We've got internet capacity available somewhere, right?
Sure, right here.
Yeah. I mean, we've got a place where we can put things on the church website, so I'll arrange to get it put
I'm
up.
out of town or so.
All right, but you can look up the church website, TAFPC,
Right.
and you'll find us, and then under Sky. It might take 2 or 3 days. John, are you here? Right. We'll get it up on the website. Okay?
Oh, good, thank you.
I hope you realize what just happened and how important it is. Almost everybody held up their hand. We admitted that sin is not a matter of breaking rules or of violating other people's expectations. Sin is not something that results from limitations being put on our freedom. Sin is itself the lack of freedom. Even without external constraints, we do not do the good that we want to do. We do the evil that we don't want to do. True and complete freedom is beyond our power. We're dependent for our freedom upon God, and without God's help, we can't truly be free. Listen to what Paul says in Romans 7. I do not understand my own actions, for I do not do what I want, but I do the very thing I hate. Now if I do what I do not want, I agree that the law is good. But in fact it is no longer I that do it, but sin that dwells within me. I can will what is right, but I cannot do it. For I do not do the good I want, but the evil I do not want is what I do. Now if I do what I do not want, it is no longer I that do it, but sin that dwells within me. Sin is something that dwells within us, that makes us broken people, trapping us sometimes into hurting the very people that we love. The rule breaking helps us identify sin and helps us recognize sin. But sin itself is not the rule breaking, it's the brokenness within. That's what sin truly is. And all of us seem to know it. All the other things, the 10 Commandments, the rules in the New Testament, the values and expectations of our parents and our culture, the law even, these things are also sometimes correct, often correct, about identifying particular acts that are sinful. But sin itself is what springs from that brokenness within. Sin is a brokenness in our relationship with God that makes us broken in our relationships with other people. And this is taught clearly in the first commandment. People sometimes think that the first commandment is, you shall have no other gods before me. But in the Jewish numbering, which most Reformed Christians agree with, that's the middle of the first commandment. The first commandment is this: I am the Lord your God. I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. And then it has an appendix. You shall have no other gods before me. The first commandment is the identification of the Lord, of Yahweh, as our God, so that we don't make the mistake of putting one else there. And the person who most commonly gets put in that place instead of the Lord is ourselves. We nominate ourselves to be God, and we break the relationship that leaves us broken inside. And all too likely to do things that hurt even the people we love, even when we don't want to. We try to make ourselves the most important person in our lives. We act as if we are our own gods. This is what Adam and Eve did in the garden when the serpent tempted them, saying that you shall be like God, knowing good and evil. This is what sin is, and why it's the source of all other sins. This brokenness within, this lack of trust in God. There's nothing wrong with not being able to love everybody. It's sufficient for us to love those that we actually meet and actually deal with. And there's nothing wrong with not foreseeing all the consequences of our actions, so long as we try to do what's right as far as we can tell. And there's nothing wrong with not being all-powerful, so long as we use what power we have, because we are not supposed to be God. God is supposed to be God. And if we let God be God, then we don't put on ourselves this incredible responsibility for controlling everything. It's when we choose ourselves to be God, despite the fact that we can't control everything, that it all goes awry. So that's why we come to confession. Not to make ourselves feel bad, not to make ourselves feel guilty, not to make ourselves feel sinful, because we already agree with that before we even start. We just proved it here. We come to confession in order to accept who we are. We come to confession in order to admit that we're human and acknowledge that God is God and not us. We include confession in our church service because this confession that we are God's people and that the Lord is our God, this is joy itself. This makes us happy. It delights us to acknowledge our sins. Because when we acknowledge them, we recognize that that's not who we really are. When we name them and point to them and say, please forgive me for having done this, we're also saying, because that's not really who I am. That's not really who you are making me to be, God. That's not really who you meant me to be from the beginning and who I will be in the end. That's not really me. And that's why I confess it. Because I'm not God and you are. That's what our confession is for. And that's why confession is part of celebration in worship.